When we think of a cinematographer's signature traits, different things may come to mind. It could be Christopher Nolan's use of symmetry, George Lucas's revolutionary special effects, or even Tarantino's eccentricity. What doesn't always come to mind is something that to the naked eye doesn't shock you or bewilder you, but rather tells its own story in a subtle way. The color palette. The color palette is essential to the director's vision and the story that they want to portray. It indirectly puts you in the position of the characters so you feel the same as them. It immerses you in the world and shifts the whole tone of the movie. With notable titles such as Fight Club, Seven, and The Social Network, David Fincher uses unique, muted color palettes to shift our feelings towards the characters and their motivations. The use of these color palettes across the movies also reflect the emotional and mental state of the character at the given time. In Fight Club, the colors of the scenes are used to contrast against the different types of numbness that the narrator faces. At the beginning of the film, Fincher uses monotone, dull whites to show how the narrator is stuck in a numb, cookie-cutter-like life, and also shows how he feels trapped in the corporate world. In the quote by film journalist V. Renee, the narrator, Edward Norton, in Fight Club is shown in a wash of colors that all seem to bleed into one another, creating this earthy, muddy look that perfectly represents his 9-to-5 khaki nightmare of a life in which he is but a piece of perfectly assembled IKEA furniture. That's why the colors in the offices of Fight Club are muted whites, to exaggerate the cookie-cutter scheme of being trapped in identical cubicles every day for the foreseeable future. Through this dull color scheme, it creates a contrast to a different type of numbness that we'll see the narrator experiences at the end of the movie, which I will cover later on. These dull colors that melt together are also used in The Social Network, where in the scene where Mark is talking to his lawyer, the scene is blurred around him with shadows and shades of muddy brown. The mix of darkness and grime are used to reflect the dirty tactics and faded morality that comes with betraying your partners. The mental state of Mark in this scene is that of a traitor, and is reflected in the color scheme. It's used to craft a visual language that mirrors the moral ambiguity of the story. In this scene, Mark is numb to his own moral conscience where he betrays his closest friend and cuts him out of the company that they created. Fincher also uses muted color palettes to represent change of a character over a movie. It is used in Seven to show the desensitization towards gruesome crime in the city, where at the scene of the first murder, veteran detective Somerset is unfazed by the brutality. In this scene, Detectives Somerset and Daniels are cast in a muted green-blue light, indicative to how normal this type of crime is to them. This is intentional, as the lack of vibrant colors mirrors the dehumanization and decay of the city as a whole. Notice the cool dark blue-green tones that create a sense of both uneasiness and gives you the sense that they see stuff like this every day. However, this contrasts against the end of the movie, where Somerset, the once numb detective, is cast in bright midday light to reflect his own personal connection to the victim and his urgency to prevent Daniels from killing Doe. The separation from the city and the source of his numbness as a whole rattles the veteran detective and makes him break down. The light almost taunting his anguish, reflecting his change of perspective in the moment. We see Fincher tell the story of both numbness and change through the use of color in his movies. However, the end scene of Fight Club uses both. Recall earlier where the dull muted colors of his job puts him in the sense of repetitive numbness. If we look side by side between that and then the last scene of the movie, it tells a completely different story. For a majority of the movie, the narrator follows the teachings of his alter ego, Tyler Durden. When he first appears in the film, we see the colors switch to the dark and grimy palette that he sees for the rest of the movie. Durden encourages the narrator to externalize his anger and rage against the corporate world, shaking him out of his numb life, but also leading him down a self-destructive road. A new type of numb where his only release is fighting. It isn't until the narrator kills Durden at the end of the movie that we see another shift in mental status. Without a voice in his ear telling him to rage against the machine, he enters a numb sense of euphoria as he sees the world he once felt trapped in burned down. The cold tones, similar to that we saw in Seven, clash against the fires billowing out of the buildings, almost representative of his own mental state quieting down, numb to the madness. End video.